What happens when the very woman who once lifted you up is the same woman you choose to tear down? That is the question behind this story, a story that begins in the quiet aisles of a shopping mall with an elderly black woman accused of shoplifting. But hidden beneath her modest clothes and shopping bags was a truth that would shatter a police officer's pride and force him to face his own reflection. Her name? A retired woman whose greatest joy was not in spending on herself, but in buying gifts for children who had little, families who had less, and communities too often forgotten. Black, white, it never mattered to her. She gave because giving was her way of breathing. And his name? A young officer, polished badge, sharp voice, eager to enforce the law. But that badge, that career, that very uniform on his back, was only possible because of a donation made years before by the same woman he was about to humiliate. He did not know it then, but he would. And when he did, the weight of that realization would crush his arrogance and plant the seed of regret that could no longer be ignored. This story is about dignity, compassion, blind prejudice, and the power of recognition. It is about what happens when judgment collides with truth, and when a man is forced to confront the very foundation of who made him possible. Stay with me, because what begins as a routine shopping trip soon spirals into a moment of raw humiliation, a discovery that shocks, and a redemption that leaves us asking, what do we really owe the people who made us who we are? Before we go any further, let me ask you this. Have you ever judged someone at first sight, only to later realize you were completely wrong? Now, let's step into that mall together, where this story begins. The Greenwood Mall was humming with its usual weekend rhythm, families weaving through aisles, teenagers clustered by shop windows, the scent of pretzels and roasted coffee drifting through polished corridors. Among the noise and bustle, Evelyn Johnson walked with quiet purpose. She was 72, her hair silvered with time, her back slightly bent but her steps steady. Her modest brown coat hung loose, and her handbag, well-worn but neatly kept, swung lightly at her side. She wasn't there for herself. Evelyn rarely was. Her shopping list, folded and creased from use, was filled with the names of children she had never met, and yet who filled her heart all the same. 2 dolls for the foster home, winter coats for the mission kids, books for the community library drive. She whispered the list softly to herself, checking it twice as she moved between stores. Charity, to Evelyn, was not an obligation, it was her joy. She had long ago decided her money, her time, and her energy were best spent on others. To the clerks who knew her, Evelyn was a familiar presence. Every December she bought out stacks of toys. Every spring, shoes for children who had none. Every fall, backpacks filled with supplies. Black families, white families, it never mattered. A child is a child, she would say. Hunger looks the same in every skin. But to Officer Daniel Reed, patrolling the mall that afternoon, she looked different. From a distance, the modest coat and inexpensive shoes told one story. The shiny boxes and clothes she was selecting told another. He narrowed his eyes, adjusting his belt as he lingered near the storefront. To him, she looked like a shoplifter waiting to happen. He had seen it before, or at least he thought he had. A person who didn't belong, eyeing things beyond their means. He didn't know Evelyn's name. He didn't know her history. All he saw was what he wanted to see. And so, assumption wrapped itself around him like armor, feeding the sharp edge of authority that pushed him forward. Inside a boutique filled with children's coats, Evelyn lifted one with small embroidered stars. She smiled, picturing a boy with shy eyes and hands too thin for his age. She imagined him slipping his arms into this very coat, walking to school warm for the first time in months. That image alone filled her with quiet satisfaction. "Excuse me, ma'am." The voice was curt, clipped. Evelyn turned, startled, to find the officer blocking the aisle. His stance was firm, one hand brushing the edge of his holster, the other gesturing toward her bag. "I'm going to need you to step aside." Evelyn's brow furrowed. "Is something wrong, officer?" Daniel's tone sharpened. "We've had reports of suspicious activity. You've been seen placing items into your bag." Her eyes widened. "That's not true. I haven't put anything in my bag." She opened her hands, calm, steady. "Everything I've picked up is right here." But Daniel wasn't listening to her words. He was listening to his own conviction, his own assumption. "Then you won't mind showing me the contents of your bag?" The store clerk, a young woman folding sweaters nearby, froze. She knew Evelyn. She had seen her dozens of times before. But Daniel's presence, the badge on his chest, carried weight, and she didn't move to intervene. Evelyn straightened, her dignity intact despite the sting of being accused. "Officer, I am here to buy coats for children at the mission. I've done so for years. There's nothing in my bag that doesn't belong to me." Her calmness only pressed Daniel further. He mistook composure for defiance. "Step aside, ma'am. Let's not make this more difficult." A small boy tugged his mother's sleeve near the aisle, his wide eyes fixed on the scene. Evelyn caught his gaze and offered a faint smile, hiding the tightening in her chest. She would not let this child or anyone else see her crumble. Daniel motioned again to her bag. His voice grew sharper, more insistent. "Open it. Now." Slowly, Evelyn lifted her handbag, unzipping it with trembling fingers. Inside were no stolen coats, no pilfered jewelry. Instead, there were receipts from the bookstore and toy shop she had visited earlier that morning. A folded flyer from the church donation drive. A handwritten list with children's names scrawled in neat cursive, each beside a gift she intended to buy. Daniel's eyes flicked over the contents. For the first time, a crack of doubt flickered. This was not the bag of a thief. This was the bag of someone with purpose, with commitment. But pride can be stubborn, and his voice stayed cold. "We'll need to confirm these purchases. Until then, you'll remain here." Evelyn's jaw tightened, though her voice never lost its grace. "Do what you must, officer. But know this, I've spent my life giving so children can stand tall. I won't bow to suspicion that's built only on what you think you see." The clerk shifted uneasily, glancing at Daniel. "She's here often," the young woman said quietly. "She always buys for the children's drive." Daniel ignored the words, clinging to procedure. His radio buzzed softly, but he waved it off. He wanted control, and control meant holding his ground. Evelyn closed her bag, clutching it to her chest. Her heart ached, not from fear, but from the humiliation of being doubted yet again. Still, she would not break. She had carried heavier burdens than this. The silence stretched in the boutique, thick and uneasy. Evelyn returned the star-embroidered coat to its hanger, her hands steady though her eyes burned. She had not come here to argue. She had come here to give. Daniel stood opposite her, pride stiffening his posture, his authority clashing against her quiet strength. And though neither knew it yet, the confrontation was far from over. Because buried in Daniel's own past was a letter with Evelyn's name, a letter he had once held with gratitude, a letter that had made him the man he was today. A truth he was about to stumble into, one that would unravel everything he thought he knew about her, and about himself. And when that truth surfaced, it would not just test his judgment. It would crush it. But that moment hadn't come yet. For now, tension hung heavy in the air, two lives locked in a quiet standoff, with the weight of hidden history pressing silently between them. The aisles of the mall would soon bear witness to the breaking of pride and the stirring of regret. The mall air felt heavier now, thick with the scent of perfume, polished tile, and unspoken judgment. Evelyn moved carefully down the aisle, a charm bracelet nestled in her hand, while Officer Daniel kept his distance, his posture rigid, his eyes locked on her every move. He thought he knew this story. Modest clothes. A full purse. A black woman lingering near the glass cases. In his mind, it all added up. His training told him to act. His pride demanded he be firm. And yet, with every second that passed, something inside him tugged, asking, "What if you're wrong?" Still he pressed on. "Ma'am," he said, his tone clipped, "we're going to have to check your bag." Evelyn turned slowly. Her gaze was steady, her voice soft but unwavering. "Young man, I've done nothing wrong. What you're asking isn't about stolen jewelry. It's about what you think when you see me." Her words struck deeper than Daniel cared to admit. His jaw tightened. He told himself he was just doing his job, that procedure mattered more than feelings. But even as he thought it, her presence unsettled him. There was no panic in her eyes, no guilt in her voice. Only dignity, The kind that made his confidence feel fragile. "Bag, now," he repeated, his voice sharper than before, trying to mask the hesitation creeping in. Evelyn sighed softly, not with fear, but with disappointment. "You remind me of so many young men I've seen rise in this city. So eager to prove yourself, that you forget what respect looks like." Her words landed like a weight on his chest. For a flicker of a second, he felt exposed, as though she saw straight through his uniform and into the boy he once was. The boy who once sat in a cramped kitchen, head in his hands, staring at an acceptance letter from the police academy. The boy who knew his mother couldn't afford the tuition. The boy who almost gave up, until a letter arrived, saying his fees had been paid in full by an anonymous donor. That memory came rushing back now, sharp and unwelcome. He hadn't thought about it in years. Back then, all he had felt was relief. Gratitude. The chance to rise. But now, standing in front of this woman, those feelings twisted into something else. He studied her more closely. The way she held herself. The quiet strength in her voice. And with a sudden, unsettling jolt, a possibility flashed in his mind, one that made his pulse race. The scholarship. The letter. The donor's name. He had never known who it was. But what if the woman standing before him, accused and cornered, was the very same person who had opened that door for him all those years ago? Daniel's throat tightened. His hands, once firm on his belt, now felt heavy and awkward. He forced himself to look at Evelyn again, but this time, he couldn't just see her as a suspect. Her calm. Her composure. Her unwavering dignity under the weight of suspicion. For the first time in his career, Daniel felt something fracture inside him. Not just doubt, fear. Because deep down, he knew he was standing on the edge of a truth that could unravel everything he believed about himself. And once it came into the light, there would be no hiding from the shame that followed. The boutique's back office was small. Just a desk, a printer, a wall calendar with last month still pinned up, and quiet enough that you could hear the soft hum of the air vent. The manager had waved them in to sort this out properly, and Evelyn obliged with the same patience she'd shown from the start. Daniel stood near the door, suddenly uncomfortable in a room with no noise to hide behind. "Mrs. Johnson," the manager said gently, "do you still have your donor card? The one from the holiday drive?" Evelyn nodded and opened her handbag. Out came a slim, careful stack, a folded church flyer, a typed list from a shelter, with shoe sizes and notes about favorite colors, and a small cream envelope with a gold-embossed crest. Inside it, a card. "Thank you for your generosity, Mrs. Evelyn Johnson. Your gifts keep children warm." The manager smiled with relief, as if the card confirmed something she already knew in her bones. Daniel's mouth went dry. The badge on his chest felt heavier than usual. He told himself to keep it procedural. Verify the receipts. Confirm identity. Close the loop. But the presence of that card, the quiet weight of it, the way the manager treated it like proof of character, cracked something that procedure couldn't patch. He cleared his throat. "I'll need to verify purchases with the other stores." His voice sounded smaller than it had on the sales floor. "Of course," Evelyn said. "Would you like the receipts?" He nodded. She handed them over, neat, time-stamped, and legitimate. A bookstore receipt with titles circled in pen. A toy shop receipt where the clerk had scribbled, "Donation, God bless you," along the bottom. A children's apparel receipt with a line discount labeled community partner. They weren't just receipts, they were witnesses. Daniel's gaze caught on a name printed faintly along the bottom of one receipt. Beneficiary, Greenwood Children's Outreach. The words punched through him. He remembered that name. He'd seen it before years ago, in the corner of a formal letter on thick paper. He blinked hard. "Don't go there." "May I see your ID, ma'am?" he asked, reaching for familiar ground. Evelyn offered it without hesitation. He read it aloud, quietly. "Evelyn Johnson." The name rattled in his chest like a key finding the lock it was meant for. He'd been 19, then broke, stubborn, surviving on noodles and naps between shifts, staring at a bill he couldn't pay and a dream he couldn't afford. And then the letter had come. He hadn't told anyone. He'd just pressed it flat on the cheap dorm desk and traced the header with his finger. Greenwood Children's Outreach. public service scholarship. No signatures beyond the committee. No individual thanked. Just one line at the bottom that had once felt like a warm hand at his back. Funded by the Evelyn M. Johnson Trust. He'd read that line 10 times. 15. It had felt like air after drowning. His eyes returned to the ID. Evelyn M. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson, he heard himself say, the formal buffer collapsing into something more fragile. Have you ever contributed to a public service scholarship? For the police academy? The manager looked from him to Evelyn, puzzled. Evelyn studied his face as though she'd been waiting for that question. Yes, she said softly. For years. He swallowed. The Greenwood Children's Outreach, the Evelyn M. Johnson Trust, that's you. It's not mine, she corrected gently. It belongs to everyone who needs it. I just helped it get started. He felt his heartbeat in his throat. Words fell apart in his mouth. He couldn't say it yet. Not with the badge still stuck like armor to his chest and the awful image of himself on the sales floor still fresh. He pressed the receipts into a tidy stack to keep his hands from shaking. The manager excused herself to print a copy of last year's donor plaque for documentation. The office door clicked shut. They were alone. Officer, Evelyn said, you don't have to tell me what that scholarship meant to you. I can see it. I remember the first letter we sent, years ago, to a boy who signed his thank you with shaky penmanship. He wrote that he wouldn't have made it if not for the help. Her eyes softened. I never met him. Daniel looked away. He didn't want her kindness. Kindness, in that moment, felt like a verdict. He forced himself back into the motion of duty. He radioed dispatch to confirm her identity and any outstanding issues. Routine words, wrote checks. But as he spoke, he kept catching his reflection in the thin office glass. A uniformed man clinging to protocol while standing in front of the woman who had made the uniform possible. Dispatch confirms valid ID, local address, no outstanding issues. The voice crackled back. The last thread of his certainty snapped. The manager returned holding a color printout. Last winter's donor ceremony. In the photo, Evelyn stood between a stack of wrapped boxes and the mall's giving tree. Beneath it, a caption, Major Donor, the Evelyn M. Johnson Trust. The printout trembled slightly in the manager's hand as she passed it to him, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. The room shrank. Daniel felt the shame rise like heat, up his neck, into his face, burning away every defense he'd built. He remembered the way he had spoken to her. The way he had reached for her bag. The words, let's not make this more difficult. He set the photo down carefully, as if it might break under his fingers. I'm sorry, he said. Evelyn tilted her head. Not indulgent. Not dismissive. Waiting. He took a breath, then another. He had learned to master his voice on traffic stops and midnight calls. He had barked orders into loud rooms and negotiated with men twice his size in darker corners than any mall. But he had never said this with his whole chest before. I am truly sorry, Mrs. Johnson. I judged you by your clothes, your age, your presence in a place that I decided, in my head, didn't match you. I embarrassed you. And if not for you, I wouldn't even be wearing this badge. Your trust funded my tuition. I owe you my job, my career, my mother's relief when I told her I could stay. I forgot what was given to me, and I used what it bought me to take something from you. Dignity. His voice thinned. I was wrong. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was full, a pause that allowed the apology to settle where it needed to. Evelyn's eyes shone, not with triumph, but with a sorrow that had learned how to be gentle. Thank you, she said. It takes courage to say that. He nodded, unable to trust more words. He moved to gather the receipts, smoothing their corners, then lifted her handbag and offered it back with both hands, like returning something sacred. I want to make this right, he said. Not just with words. Evelyn considered him a long moment. Then start here, she said, tapping the list on the desk. Help me finish. Jaden needs shoes. Emily needs mittens. Marcus, he's easy, he wants superheroes. A soft smile ghosted across her face. Carry the bags. Learn their names. Let it change the way you look at people. He almost laughed, a breathless, disbelieving sound. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and meant every syllable. They stepped back onto the sales floor together. The clerk looked up, wary, and then relaxed at the sight of Daniel walking beside Evelyn, not ahead of her. He took the star-embroidered coat from the rack and held it while Evelyn compared sizes, asking the clerk's opinion, listening. He carried the boxes to the register. He pulled out his own card when the total appeared, hands steady this time. Evelyn touched his sleeve. "No," she said quietly. "Your turn to listen. This isn't about money. It's about how you wear that badge." He put the card away. The clerk slipped an envelope into the bag. "A thank you from the store," she said, cheeks flushed. "We should have spoken sooner." "It's all right," Evelyn replied. "Speaking now is what matters." They moved from store to store, the bookstore where the cashier knew exactly which stories made shy boys smile, the shoe shop where the manager brought out a pair with red laces because the kid who wants to run faster always picks red. With every stop, Daniel's image of himself shifted, less enforcer, more servant, less shield, more bridge. He wrote names carefully on each bag as Evelyn dictated, spelling them twice to get them right. By late afternoon, the cart was full, coats, books, shoes, small gifts wrapped in plain paper. Daniel walked a step behind, pushing the load with care, conscious of how different his posture felt. Lighter, somehow. He had never understood how heavy pride was until he'd set it down. At the mall exit he paused. The air from the parking lot was warm, heavy with the smell of sun-baked asphalt. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes kind and clear. "I'll take it from here, officer." He hesitated. "May I?" He stopped, searching for the right way to ask. "May I come with you? To the center. To help deliver. I'd like to see this through. And I need to say something to my captain about today. About training. About how we can do this better." Evelyn studied him, weighing not just his words, but the man behind them. "You may come," she said at last. "But understand something. Today is not about you fixing what you broke in an hour. It's about you deciding who you'll be in every hour after." He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." They reached her car. He lifted the heaviest bags first, setting them gently in the trunk. He paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, edges worn, creases deep. He unfolded it and held it toward her with hands that no longer shook. The scholarship letter. His letter. Her name in the corner. "I kept it," he said, voice low. "Every time I wanted to quit the academy, I read it. Every time the job hardened me, I forgot to." Evelyn's fingers brushed the page, and for a moment her composure trembled. "Then read it again tonight," she said. "And tomorrow. And when you train the next officer, read it to him." He swallowed. "I will." He closed the trunk, and the soft thud sounded like a door finishing a long journey to being truly shut. But another door had opened, one he couldn't ignore. He looked back at the mall, at the boutique where he'd raised his voice, at the office where the truth found him. The uniform hadn't changed. He had. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, straightening, not in stiffness but in resolve, "when we're done at the center, I'm going back to the precinct. I'm filing a corrective memo about today and requesting to lead bias training with real community partners, your center, the mission, the library drive, all of them. And I'm going to ask my captain to put me on foot patrols where I can learn names instead of profiles." Evelyn's smile this time reached her eyes. That would be a good start. He opened the driver door for her, then walked around to the passenger side without thinking, hands ready to lift, carry, serve, whatever was needed. But as he pulled the handle, he froze. A thought struck like a cold wind, quick and uninvited. If this is who you're going to be now, you can't leave today as it is. He turned back toward the mall, to the boutique where the manager and clerk were still inside, to the place where the wrong thing had been done under the quiet glow of pretty lights. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, breath steady, "before we deliver these, there's something I have to do. Not to talk about change, to record it, in ink, where it can't be ignored." He took a step toward the doors, decision already settling in his bones. And when he walked back in, he wasn't carrying suspicion. He was carrying a pen. Daniel pushed through the glass doors of the mall, bags set aside in Evelyn's trunk. his pulse racing with a kind of determination he had never carried on patrol. Not the adrenaline of a chase, not the stiffness of procedure. This was different. This was heavier and lighter at the same time. Inside the boutique, the clerk and manager froze when they saw him return. The manager looked defensive, bracing for confrontation. The clerk looked nervous, still recalling the awkward silence of moments earlier. Daniel removed his hat and tucked it under his arm. He didn't stand tall this time, didn't square his shoulders like a wall. He spoke evenly, but humbly, letting his words do the work. "I need to make something clear," he said, his voice carrying enough to be firm, but not to intimidate. "Mrs. Johnson did nothing wrong. I treated her unfairly, and I regret it. I'll be filing a full report about my actions today, including my mistakes, and you'll be included in that process. If you choose to write your own statements about how this unfolded, I'll support it." The manager blinked, unsure if she was hearing correctly. "You want to put it in writing?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Because apologies don't mean much if they vanish into the air. They need to live somewhere official, where they can remind me, and others, not to repeat the same failure." The clerk softened, almost relieved. The manager nodded stiffly. She didn't say thank you, but Daniel didn't need it. He wasn't doing this for approval. He was doing it because Evelyn had reminded him that respect wasn't optional, it was owed. When he left the store a second time, Evelyn was waiting outside the car, leaning on her cane, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You wrote it down," she said. He nodded. Words fade. Paper doesn't. "Then maybe you've begun," she replied, climbing into the driver's seat. The drive to Greenwood Community Center was quiet at first. Bags rustled in the back, Evelyn's careful handwriting on each tag. Jaden, Emily, Marcus. Each bag was not just fabric and ribbon but a promise. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, his own reflections staring back at him in fragments. When they arrived, children's voices spilled out of the center, bright, chaotic, alive. Volunteers bustled at folding tables, organizing winter coats, games, and books. As Evelyn stepped out, people greeted her warmly, calling her name, thanking her, hugging her gently. "Mrs. Johnson," a young mother said, lifting her daughter onto her hip. "You remembered her favorite color." She held up a soft purple scarf. Evelyn only smiled, passing the woman another bag. "Of course." Daniel followed behind with the heavier boxes. The eyes on him were different, curious, cautious. Some parents recognized his uniform and stiffened. Others simply watched. He set the boxes down and stood awkwardly, unsure how to exist here without suspicion. "Officer?" a boy's voice piped up. Daniel looked down. The boy, no more than 8, pointed at the badge on his chest. "Is that heavy?" Daniel smiled faintly. Sometimes it's heavier than it looks." The boy nodded as if he understood. "Mrs. Johnson says carrying gifts makes your back stronger. Maybe your badge works like that too." The boy darted off before Daniel could reply. But the words stuck. Stronger, not harder. Inside the center, Evelyn introduced him to the staff. "This young officer is here to help today. He's learning." The word learning landed like a second chance. Daniel listened, really listened, as parents explained how donations kept their kids in school, how a pair of shoes meant fewer skip days, how a winter coat meant health instead of illness. He bent down to help a girl lace her sneakers, handed a book to a shy boy, carried another bag to the pantry. Slowly, the stiffness in his shoulders melted. He wasn't a wall here. He was a bridge. And Evelyn noticed. She watched the way Daniel knelt to tie the girl's shoelaces, the way he crouched so he wouldn't tower over the shy boy, the way his eyes softened each time he realized that dignity wasn't about authority, it was about care. Later that week, Daniel stood in front of his precinct captain. His voice didn't waver. "I mishandled an encounter at Greenwood Mall. I profiled Mrs. Evelyn Johnson unfairly. I've submitted a written account of my actions and am requesting disciplinary review. I also want to propose mandatory community immersion sessions for recruits, partnering directly with organizations like Greenwood Center." The captain frowned, taken aback by his bluntness. "You're opening yourself up, Riley. This will be on record." "I know," Daniel said. "It should be. If I'm not accountable, then I don't deserve this badge." For a long moment, the captain just studied him. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll review your proposal. And your honesty." It was an absolution, but it was a start. Weeks later, Daniel found himself back at Greenwood Center, not as an officer on duty, but as a volunteer on his day off. He stacked cans, sorted coats, read stories to kids who gathered cross-legged at his booths. Parents watched carefully at first, then more easily, as his consistency proved real. Evelyn moved through the room like sunlight, her cane tapping lightly, her laughter stitching the community together. Daniel often caught her watching him, not with judgment, but with something like guarded hope. One evening, after the tables were cleared and the last families had gone, Daniel approached her. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, "I used to think the badge was what made me matter. But I'm starting to understand, it's what I do when nobody's watching that decides who I really am." Evelyn placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. "Then wear it that way. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder." He nodded, her words burning their way into him. Months passed. At the academy, Daniel stood in front of a room of wide-eyed recruits. On the screen behind him, photos from Greenwood Center glowed, rows of coats, children with shy smiles, volunteers busy with bags. "Bias isn't just wrong," he told them. "It makes you blind. I almost lost my integrity because I refused to see past my own assumptions. But the people you serve, they aren't profiles. They're stories. If you forget that, this badge becomes nothing but tin." Some recruits shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in. But all of them listened. And when class ended, Daniel placed a folded letter on his desk, the one he'd kept since 19. He opened it one more time, tracing the bottom line, "Funded by the Evelyn M. Johnson Trust." He smiled faintly. Stronger, not harder. The mall was quieter now, winter lights glowing across polished floors. Evelyn moved slowly through the aisles, her cane steady. Daniel walked beside her, not to shadow, but to share. Shoppers passed, unbothered, unaware of the story that had unfolded here weeks before. At one store, Evelyn paused, admiring a scarf in the window. Daniel slipped inside, bought it, and returned with a small bag. He held it out without a word. She chuckled softly. "Still learning." He smiled. "Every day." As they stepped outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow. The scarf shimmered under the lights, and Evelyn pulled it around her shoulders. For Daniel, it wasn't just a winter evening. It was proof that shame can turn to change, that dignity can teach discipline, that respect can rewrite even the hardest lessons. And for Evelyn, it was simple. Another gift, another life touched. Because giving was still her way of breathing. This was the story of an elderly black woman, wrongly accused, and a cop forced to see himself through her eyes. What would you have done in his shoes? If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters, just like hers did.